بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Unfortunately, I had something for the board, something for the screen, but it's not opening for some reason, so it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they're trying to get up this, there you go. That's something else that I requested. If you could make it a bit smaller, if you can hear me, so we can see more of the verses. I actually had something different that was set out in different colored clusters and so on, just to give you an explanation of that. But inshallah, this should do. Many of us, we speak about the Quran being eloquent. And from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it was a point that was well established and proven because the Quran was a miracle. And when we say the Quran is a miracle or a mu'jiza, in Arabic the word mu'jiza comes from the word i'jaz, which means to provide a challenge to someone that they cannot meet. So a mu'jiza is an inimitable miracle. And that was the time, during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it was a time of the peak of eloquence. People, Bedouins, who had absolutely, the people in the towns, the majority of them did not know how to read and write. So the Bedouins clearly did not know much about writing or reading, but yet they would be able to compose poetry on the go, impromptu, lines and lines, verses and verses of it, long, long ones that kind of all sound the same. Right? So it's something that they had inherent within them. It was just so second nature to them to do that. And the best of the best would then be hung on the Kaaba. They were called the mu'allaqat, those which are suspended off the Kaaba, of the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And among them you had the 7 or the 10 that were the most famous. So clearly anybody who could speak better than someone else or compose something, prose or poetry that was better than anybody else, would be greatly celebrated. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He normally sends prophets with a miracle that is conducive to that time. Right? I'm trying to rush because we have only an hour and this could take 3 or 4 hours to really get to the depth and the beauty of it. So I'm rushing a bit. But these are things that you've probably already heard, many of us. So what you had, for example, is a little later, towards the end of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, you had another claimant of prophethood. You saw that this was a great thing, this was something you could get great influence by. So you had this Musaylama from the Banu Hanifa tribe down south in Arabia, and he claimed to be a prophet. So he must have been asked that this Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he has a Quran, he has speech which is unmatched, right? They just, even the best of the speakers, the best of the eloquent people of the time, they could just see that this was not human speech. Because it was just so short, so concise, yet the meanings of it would just be overflowing. That's what you call eloquent speech. That's something that hits the mark, something that is very effective, that does the job in the best way possible. For example, somebody's about to drop into to their destruction. You're not going to stand and speak like a British aristocrat. Hey, please mind the fire. The guy would be dead by the time you said that. By the time you got to fire, you say, stop, stop. Right? That's what you would normally, that's the most effective things to say at that time. So normally, eloquent speech, or balagha from baligh, is that speech which does not contain terms that are very difficult for people to normally understand. And it is said in the most appropriate, it is said using the most appropriate amount of words. Sometimes what you have is, you have this concept called musawat. Musawat means that you use the absolute, you use the exact number of words that are required to convey that message. If you're able to say it in a more concise way, then it's called ijaz. So it's by using less words, same meaning. If you want to add additional words for a particular benefit, to provide an additional point with the message you're trying to articulate, then that's called itnab. But there are some people who are very long-winded, If they have to explain something to you, you'll be sitting there for an hour with them. Right? I'm sure everybody must know somebody like that. Oh, the guy started, some speakers are probably blamed for being something like that. Right? May Allah protect us from tatweel. You call that tatweel, where you just go on without benefit. It's just all fluff. It's just all superficial additions to the original message. May Allah protect us from that. The Prophet ﷺ is known for jawami'ul kalim, which means comprehensive statements that were so short. Ad-deenun nasiha, a two-word sentence. Ad-deenun nasiha. The deen is to wish well for all. That includes everything and anybody. Right? So you can understand from statements like that, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ قُلْ آمَنْتُ بِاللَّهِ ثُمَّ اسْتَقِمْ. These are short words, because that's the mu'jiza of Rasulullah ﷺ to say that, to be able to speak like that by himself. The Quran was even a greater mu'jiza. Going back to this Musaylama, when he was asked to compose something, he came up with some really weird concoction. الْفِيلُ مَا الْفِيلُ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْفِيلُ خُرْطُمُهُ طَوِيلٌ. And then he goes on. Instead of أَلَمْ تَرَى كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ, he decided that he's going to compose a surah. So he says, Al-fil, mal-fil, the elephant. What about the elephant? Right? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا-الْفِيلُ. What do you know about the elephant? خُرْطُومُهُ طَوِيلٌ. Its trunk is long, big deal. Right? So it's very superficial, you can see, shallow. Whereas with the Quran, it's a book that applies from day one to the last day, in terms of its generality. That's why it has so few particular, that's why it avoids very particular kind of rulings, because it uses very general rulings that can apply at any given time in the world. So the Quran was unchallenged at that time. People tried, but it would not, even the enemies had to just recognize and acknowledge that this is something else. So then they tried to pass it off as magic, they tried to pass it off as somebody possessed, right? But the Prophet ﷺ says, "A'udhu billahi min." The Quran itself asks you to seek protection from the shaitan. So all of these things, they were just different charges against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Eventually, the Quran prevailed. Now today, let's open up some of this for you. If I was to ask you, where does the eloquence of the Quran lie? Right? What has been your understanding of it? Would you say, and the gist of what I've been speaking about until now also leads in that direction, most of you would probably say, right, and you can agree with me, does it lie in the sound of it? Does it lie in the construction of it? Does it lie in the words? Does it lie in the way the sentences are structured? Right? So do you think it lies in the sound of it? Have you ever considered the eloquence of the Quran in the sound of it? Well, you must have, because you've got Abu Bakr al-Shatri coming here. Right? So clearly there is an attraction towards the sound of it. Because anybody could read the Quran, but Abu Bakr al-Shatri, may Allah bless him, right, reads it in a particular way that he's become international. Right? For his recitation of it. He doesn't explain it, he doesn't give you a tafsir of it, but yet he's become famous for his recitation, like Sudais and others. So, although we associate balagha with sound as well, the greatest focus by most of the mufassirin as well has been on the construction of the words, has been on the way the words are formed, their morphology, the word used, their etymology, the grammatical structure of it. That's what has been normally said. For example, I don't know if inshallah it's an appropriate example, you shouldn't take it the wrong way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاتٌ. Right? Who knows what that means? It just sounds such a juxtaposition. For you is life in qisas. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ. For you in qisas is life. What is qisas? Qisas is an eye for an eye, a life for a life. Right? That's qisas. Qisas is the retribution, the penalties, Islamic hudud. For you in that is life. Juxtaposition, isn't it? But yet, if the ulama of Arabic and of jurisprudence are to sit together and try to construct any other phrase or expression that could say the same things in a short, lesser number of words, they'd find that they can't do that. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاتٌ. Right? وَلَكُمْ for you, and for you, فِي الْقِصَاص. In qisas is hayat, is life. Two opposing concepts. A life for a life is where you take a life because he's taken another life. But in there is life for you. We don't have the time to talk about that in detail, but if you wish, you can go and look in the tafsir of that. You may find something. Today we turn to Sura Qiyama. Sura Qiyama, many of you are probably aware of this surah, you probably like to read it. I would consider it one of the most beautiful surahs to read, along with Surah Rahman. Surah Rahman is famous for its beauty. That's why it's called the Quran. It's called the bride, the adorned surah of the Quran in the hadith. Surah Qiyama is very close to it in terms of its beauty. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بالنفس اللوامة أيحسب الإنسان أن لن نجمع عظامه بلى قادرين على أن نسوي بنانه بل يريد الإنسان ليفجر أمامه يسأل أيان يوم القيامة فإذا برق البصر وخسف القمر وجمع الشمس والقمر يقول الإنسان يومئذ أين المفر كلا لا وزر إلى ربك يومئذ المستقر ينبأ الإنسان يومئذ بما قدم وأخر بل الإنسان على نفسه بصيرة. And it continues. Unfortunately, we don't have the other one which actually put all the clusters together. But Surah Qiyama proves a great point, or demonstrates something very interesting. Aside from the eloquence of the words that are used, if you look at this surah, there are a number of things that are happening here. So you've got, if you go back up, I don't know if somebody's controlling this. MashaAllah, Jazakallah, thank you very much, whoever it is. لا أقسم بيوم القيامة لوامة إضامة banana, amama, qiyama, and then it goes into فَإِذَا. إِذَا is to show suddenness. فَإِذَا بَرِقَ الْبَصَرُ قَمَرُ, and so on. Right? So initially it starts off at this pace. It's a surah that is very easy to read. It is very smooth flowing. It's got a cadence that's just amazing. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts it off first. Actually, let's just go through to show you the clusters. Essentially, many surahs are made up of clusters. Surah Qiyama is made up of 5 or 6 clusters. Each of them sound the same. Then it moves into the next cluster, and those sound the same. There's a change of meaning or a change of theme that takes place as well. So, essentially what's happening is, there is also sound that is being used to convey the meaning and the change in the meaning along with the words. So the words have a different sound. If you notice qiyamah, right? It shows a kind of a brooding seriousness. Basar, qamar, all of that sounds more fast-paced, right? Now, I hate to give this as an example, but when people watch movies, they see that the music changes. And there's credits at the end as to who was the, who the credits go to for the different music that's used. The music creates a certain, it contributes to the overall feel of that particular scene, doesn't it? Well, it's a sad fact that I'm having to use a haram example of it, right? Except the doof. But that's why music is so powerful, but that power, we don't need that power, we need the power of the Quran. That's the whole reason why music has that issue, because it's so powerful. And there's a hadith which says that al-ghina'u yunbitu al-nifaqa fil qalb kama yunbitu al-ma'u az-zar. Right? It's a weak hadith, but the wisdom in it is great. Because what it says is, ghina, singing, music, etc., creates hypocrisy in the heart, or causes hypocrisy to grow in the heart, just like water causes crops to grow. And the way I understand that is that the Quran And the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what should be filling our hearts and giving and providing us tranquility. Right? When people turn over to music and they want music to do that to them, then essentially the Quran will not have the same effect on them because they're accustomed to another source. Right? Wallahu a'lam, but that seems to be the understanding of this narration. But I'll show you the music in the Quran today, inshallah. Right? So let's just look at this. You've got, until verse 6, you've got one cluster, all sounding as amama, with the ha at the end. Then if you can push this up a bit, right? If you're still there, yeah. فَإِذَا, yeah, there you go. فَإِذَا بَرِقَ الْبَصَرُ خَسَفَ الْقَمَرُ القمر مفر وزر مستقر أخر. Right, that's the next cluster until verse 13. That's the next cluster. Then it changes theme again. Jazakallah. Then it's the next theme. You've got بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا. Back to that kind of reflecting tone again. Because it's about, if you look at the meaning as well, إِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا. Rather, man against himself will be a witness. وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَاذِيرًا لَا تُحَرِّكْ بِهِ لِسَانَكَ لِتَعْجَلَ بِهِ. Okay, so until ma'adhira. Then this is the one verse in between which is different. It's the only one verse that's independent like that and unique. Its message is also like an interruption in the middle. The Prophet ﷺ is being addressed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is first speaking about the Qiyama. Suddenly in between, he's telling the Prophet ﷺ, don't move your lips so fast that you're trying to memorize it. Because initially what used to happen is when the revelation used to come through the angel Jibreel alayhi salam, or in any of the other ways, the Prophet ﷺ would quickly repeat the words to try to memorize them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him here, when he sees him doing that in the middle of this in the middle of this revelation, لا تحرك به لسانك لتعجل به. Do not move not your tongue with it, O Muhammad, to hasten with recitation of the Quran. Indeed, upon us, in your heart, to its recording in your heart, and to make possible its recitation. We are responsible for preserving in your heart. You don't need to recite it quickly to do that. And then he carries on. ثُمَّ إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا بَيَانًا كَلَّا بَلْ تُحِبُّونَ الْعَاجِلَةَ. Then it goes back to عَاجِلَةَ, آخِرَةَ, نَاظِرَةَ, نَاظِرَةَ, بَاسِرَةَ, فَاقِرَةَ. And then كَلَّا إِذَا بَلَغَتِ التَّرَاقِي. That one is different because it's introducing a new cluster. This one here, كَلَّا إِذَا بَلَغَتِ التَّرَاقِي وَقِيلَ مَنْ رَاقَ وَظَنَّ أَنَّهُ الْفِرَاقَ وَالْتَفَّتِ السَّاقُ بِالسَّاقِ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ يَوْمَئِذٍ الْمَسَاقُ. And then it changes again. فَلَا صَدَّقْ. Now this is where, when it opens up with the lam, فَلَا صَدَّقَ وَلَا صَلَّى وَلَكِنْ كَذَّبَ وَتَوَلَّى. So again it changes the cadence of it. فَلَا صَدَّقَ وَلَا صَلَّى وَلَكِنْ كَذَّبَ وَتَوَلَّى ثُمَّ ذَهَبَ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهِ يَتَمَطَّى أَوْلَى لَكَ فَأَوْلَى ثُمَّ أَوْلَى لَكَ فَأَوْلَى أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانُ أَنْ يُتْرَكَ سُدًى أَلَمْ يَكُنْ نُطْفَةً مِّن مَّنِيٍّ يُمْنَىٰ ثُمَّ كَانَ عَلَقَةً فَخَلَقَ فَسَوَّىٰ فجعل منه الزوجين الذكر والأنثى أليس ذلك بقادر على أن يحيي الموتى. Now you can see in there you've got 5 or 6 different clusters. Let's look a bit about the meaning. Firstly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you go back to the top, it starts off with an oath. Essentially this surah, Surah Qiyama, comes after Surah Al-Muzammil, and it comes before Surah Al-Insan. And there's a purpose for this surah. In the previous surah, it said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَلَّا بَلْ لَا يَخَافُونَ الْآخِرَةِ. That they do not fear the hereafter. That's the whole purpose for the problems that they have. Over and over in the Quran that has been mentioned, that one of the reasons why the Meccans had this issue is because they did not believe in the hereafter. They had nowhere to go. That's the point of materialism today as well. When you don't believe that you've got somewhere to go after this, you think this world is your final destination, you make the most of it, right? You make the most of it in not necessarily the most positive way, in view of the hereafter. So that's what the whole problem was. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dedicates a whole surah to this. Now look at this amazing thing here in the beginning. لا أقسم بيوم القيامة. What that means is, no, I swear by the resurrection. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swearing by? He's swearing by the day of judgment, Qiyamah. What were the people rejecting? The day of judgment. He's swearing by the same thing that they're rejecting. How can you do that? You don't believe in something and I swear by it. Right? How does that work? Essentially, this is a specific type of oath where you swear about something although you disbelieve in it. But because of the imminence of it and because of its absolute reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is essentially saying that I'm swearing by the day of judgment. And if you think about it, as the rest of the surah will make you think and reflect, you will also recognize that it is such an essential reality that it is absolutely valid for us to swear by it and establish it. Once you have agreed that it's valid for us to swear by it, you will believe in it as well. It's a very bold move to do that. That you're rejecting something, I'm using that same thing you reject to prove it to you. لا أقسم بيوم القيامة. The second thing he uses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears in the Quran quite often. When we're talking about oaths, that kind of swearing, right? وَالْفَجْرِ وَالْعَصْرِ, right? وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرِ, and so on and so forth. Just numerous. It's just to show everything in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by. It's normally something that is quite immense, something that is quite majestic, that's something quite majestic and great that can be sworn by. The next thing is وَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِالنَّفْسِ اللَّوَّامَةِ, and I swear by the reproaching soul. And the translator has, for our benefit, added to the certainty of resurrection. I swear by the reproaching soul. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to get to your heart. The whole miracle of the Quran, right, is that even when non-Muslims, the most effective book that they would have read would have been the Quran before they became Muslim. Because there's no bias in the Quran. With any other book, it's written with a particular bias, to some madhab, to some way of thought, to some sectarian understanding, to orthodoxy, whatever it may be. The Quran is just there speaking to the human being, pulling at the chords of your heart. Any verse would show you that. Here it's about, I swear by the reproaching soul. Nafsul Lawwama, which is the soul that tells you off when you're about to do a sin. That voice you hear inside. It's as opposed to what Yusuf alayhi salam said in Nafsa la'ammaratun bis-su. He talked about the other type of soul, which is the one that incites you to evil. This one is the one that that blames you and censors you. Right? Now, if you feel sometimes, I need to do this, let me go to that place because my friends are going, right? And there's something within you that's inciting you, and there's something else, another voice in our hearts that is saying, don't go, then it's those two, it is those two nufus, those two souls that are at each other. The fact that both of them can speak at once means that we are somewhere in between. If the self-inciting to evil soul could never speak, it means we've dominated it. But if we fall prey to the inciting soul, then the lawwama will go down and it will be dominated. And that means we will, as soon as somebody tells us, let's go and do this haram, let's go to this party, let's indulge in this, or get ourselves involved in this, we'll just do it because the incitement is so great. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swearing by the reproaching soul. أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانُ أَن لَّن نَّجْمَعَ عِظَامَهُ. Another thing that the Quran does, that's why what I can't understand, and may Allah give tawfiq to the multitudes of Muslims. How many of you here are able to read the Quran with some kind of understanding and reflection of it from the Arabic? Put your hands up. Right, that's really sad. Right, it's really sad. Because most of what I'm saying is going to be lost to you. Right? It's a big task to try to explain to you the beauty of the Quran because the meaning, just understanding it, it's so great. We've got people who, mashallah, diligently will recite the Quran for 50, 60, 70 years, and they're adhering to everything, they're fulfilling all of their requirements, they're making salah, they're doing everything, but they don't understand the Quran. And it's a sad fact that they're not even trying. Right? Yes, you still get reward for reading the Quran even without understanding, but the reflection of the Quran is just something, once you're able to do that, it just takes you beyond anything. If you're able to understand, if the translation is so powerful for you, then imagine understanding that directly from the Arabic. May Allah give us also, many of you are students, you need to have at least Arabic as part of your course. At least somewhere you need to study Arabic, right? It's an encouragement. You're going to do that, inshallah. So, the Quran, what it does is, it doesn't just tell you a story, right? It doesn't just tell you a story. Look at what this next surah is doing, this next ayah is doing. أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانُ أَلَّن نَجْمَعَ عِظَامَهُ. Does man think that we will not assemble his bones? What is that? And you can speak. It's okay. Sorry? It's a question, right? Rhetorical question. It's a question. What is the purpose of a question? It's to engage you. When you're reading that and it says, أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانُ أَلَّن نَجْمَعَ عِظَامَهُ, you're going to be thinking about it. That's what the Quran does. It engages. It's not just telling you a story, you must sit there and listen. It's engaging, it's asking you questions, it's causing you to reflect. And then it responds, بَلَا قَادِرِينَ عَلَىٰ أَن نُسَوِّيَ بَنَانَهُ. Yes, we are able to proportion his fingertips. Asks a question in the royal we. أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانُ أَلَّن نَجْمَعَ عِظَامَهُ. Sorry, yes. In the royal we. So it's in the first tense with the royal we. And then it responds in the same. Yes, it responds. We are able to not only assemble his bones in the hereafter, but we can recreate up to your fingertips. And this was over 1400 years ago. Right? An indication towards the uniqueness of everybody's fingertip, which we're using in the last 50 to 100 years, we're using to identify individuals as a unique method of identification. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about that 1400 years ago, we can even recreate that same fingertip. Imagine the qudra that in this 2 centimeters by 1 centimeter of every single human being on the earth, that they're all different. Look at the qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that. I mean, if somebody told you, I'll give you these pieces of 2 by 1 centimeter small papers, right? I'll give you 100 of them. I want you to draw a different pattern on all of them. With 100, you might be able to do it. With 1,000, you're going to start wondering what to do. But can you imagine the billions of human beings that live? And everybody has a separate fingertip. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do that now, He can do that later. So He's trying to establish to them, forget about your whole body and bringing your bones back. We can even bring your skin back. We can even bring the lines on your skin back. بَلْ يُرِيدُ الْإِنسَانُ لِيَفْجُرَ أَمَامَهُ. But man desires to just continue in sin because they don't think about this. They don't think, this is obviously a statement. يَسْأَلُ أَيَّانَ يَوْمُ الْقِيَامَةِ. He asks, when is the day of resurrection? That's man. Because their belief in materialism is so strong, they just ask, when is the day of judgment? فَإِذَا, now it changes. فَإِذَا, so when the question comes as to when is the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers that question. So He says, فَإِذَا بَرِقَ الْبَصَرُ وَخَسَفَ الْقَمَرُ وَجُمِعَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ يَقُولُ الْإِنسَانُ يَوْمَئِذٍ أَيْنَ الْمَفَرُ. And again, the depiction of the hereafter is like this. So, when the vision is dazzled, because of the things that will be taking place. It says in another place in the Quran, تَمُرُّ مَرَّ السَّحَابِ صُنْعَ اللَّهِ الَّذِي أَتْقَنَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. The mountains that we see and we look up to, and we can if you go to a mountainous range, I'm sure if you've been there, you just look up and you think, Subhanallah, look at these mountains. Those will be turned into tufts of wool. And it says in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the mountains in the Quran about 17 to 20 different times in different ways. One place it says, تَمُرُّ مَرَّ السَّحَابِ. They will just be passing along like clouds are passing along. Sun'a Allah. This is the ability of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the making of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. الَّذِي أَتْقَنَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. Who has created everything in a firm manner. Because it says that then the earth will be totally flattened. These mountains will be totally blown to dust, and the earth will be totally flattened. لا ترى فيها عوجا ولا أمتا. You will not be able to see in it any crookedness. There's two words used there as in Surah Taha. عوجا أمتا. They both mean crookedness. But as Razi explains, one of them means that if you were to look with the naked eye, you wouldn't see any crookedness. So when you look at it, it's totally flat and straight. And if you were to use instruments to measure its flatness, you would still find that it's totally flat. That's how flat Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make the earth. And so, فَإِذَا بَرِقَ الْبَصَرِ. That's definitely, so when the vision will be dazzled. وَخَسَفَ الْقَمَرِ. And the moon will darken. No source of light. وَجُمِعَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرِ. In fact, we'll get no light. The sun and the moon will be joined together. They'll be joined together. They will not be performing their function anymore. يَقُولُ الْإِنسَانُ يَوْمَئِذٍ أَيْنَ الْمَفَرُ. Now, the human will be saying, where is the escape? Where is the place of escape? Where can we go? You look above, the mountains are gone. إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انشَقَّتْ. The heavens have been split. Right? The heavens have been split. إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انفَطَرَتْ. So that you can't, there's nothing up there. The ground is all flattened out. There's nothing left. What happens in an earthquake? Right? Everything just goes to rubble. Now imagine an earthquake so severe that everything is flattened. Because the ground is opening and just taking everything back in, and it's revolving the soil around, or the constituents of the earth around such a degree that it's just totally flat. That's the earthquake of the Day of Judgment. It will be beyond any Richter scale measurement. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows that in His very fast pace by using the word إِذَا. Now look at that as well. إِذَا بَرِقَ الْبَصَرِ. Just two words. بَرِقَ الْبَصَرِ. خَسَفَ الْقَمَرِ. جُمِعَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرِ. يَقُولُ الْإِنسَانُ يَوْمَئِذٍ أَيْنَ الْمَفَرُ. كَلَّا لَا وَزَرُ. No, there is no refuge. That is to increase the dread. That is to increase the dread, so that when people are frightened, they think, they reflect more. Because it takes them away from their comfort zone. The reason why we don't think much of the time is because we feel we're very comfortable, everything's going according to plan. In fact, better than planned. Sometimes we're very comfortable, everything is, the amenities are there, we have conveniences. But when this happens, then a person is taken out of their comfort zone. There is no refuge. إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ يَوْمَئِذٍ الْمُسْتَقَرُ. To your Lord, that day is the place of permanence. That is your final abode. That is, you will only be going to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unfortunately, we don't have time to carry on, but just point a few other things out to you. يُنَبَّأُ الْإِنسَانُ يَوْمَئِذٍ بِمَا قَدَّمَ وَأَخَّرَ. The Quran uses that kind of juxtaposition a lot. قَدَّمَ وَأَخَّرَ. What he sent ahead and what he kept back. The wording as well. قَدَّمَ أَخَّرَ. قَدَّمْ أَخَّرَ. One means to send back, one means to send forth. A lot of this juxtaposition is used as well, but obviously you can only appreciate it if you really understand it in that. If you carry on down, there's another place I want to show you. Further down, please. Yes. وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. Some faces that they will be radiant. نَاظِرَةٌ refers to resplendence, shining face. Some faces on that day will be resplendent because they will be given the glad tidings of paradise. They'll be able to see Subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. Looking at their Lord. Look at the use of the word نَاظِرَةٌ and نَاظِرَةٌ. It's even difficult to say for most people if you don't know your dad and your dha. Right? وُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. Where are we going to? Okay, there you go. Right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses in the Quran, quite frequently, He uses the metaphor of the face. Some faces on that day will be resplendent, radiant. And then if you look 2 verses down, 24, وَوُجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ بَاسِرَةٌ, and some faces that day will be contorted, downcast, right? Just darkened, in great grief will be expressed on their face. تَظُنُّ أَن يُفْعَلَ بِهَا فَاقِرَةٌ, expecting that there will be done to them something backbreaking. They know, you can see on their face. Why is the face being mentioned here? Even in Ghashiyah, the face is being used. Anybody? Right. It's essentially what you're all saying, which is that you could say the body, but that may have not had the same impact, because what you see on the face is very telling. A happy face expresses what the body is feeling most of the time. Right? So that metaphor of the face is used very effectively to just show how the person is feeling as a whole, something we relate to. Now look at the juxtaposition again. نَاظِرَةٌ نَاظِرَةٌ بَاسِرَةٌ فَاقِرَةٌ. And then the next part is also very beautiful, but I'm going to stop here because we don't have time we don't have enough time. We'll give you a small break.
The point of a lecture is to encourage people to act, to get further, an inspiration, an encouragement, persuasion. The next step is to actually start learning seriously, to read books, to take on a subject of Islam and to understand all the subjects of Islam, at least at their basic level, so that we can become more aware of what our deen wants from us. And that's why we started Rayyan courses, so that you can actually take organized lectures on demand whenever you have free time, especially, for example, the Islamic Essentials course that we have on there, the Islamic Essentials Certificate, which you take 20 short modules, and at the end of that, inshallah, you will have gotten the basics of most of the most important topics in Islam, and you'll feel a lot more confident. You don't have to leave lectures behind. You can continue to leave, to listen to lectures, but you need to have this more sustained study as well. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The point of a lecture is to encourage people to act, to get further, an inspiration, an encouragement, persuasion. The next step is to actually start learning seriously, to read books, to take on a subject of Islam and to understand all the subjects of Islam, at least at their basic level, so that we can become more aware of what our deen wants from us. And that's why we started Rayyan courses, so that you can actually take organized lectures on demand whenever you have free time, especially, for example, the Islamic Essentials course that we have on there, the Islamic Essentials Certificate, which you take 20 short modules, and at the end of that, inshallah, you will have gotten the basics of most of the most important topics in Islam, and you'll feel a lot more confident. You don't have to leave lectures behind. You can continue to leave, to listen to lectures, but you need to have this more sustained study as well. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.